Nighttime workers of Reddit, what's the freakiest stuff you've seen on the job? I'm a nurse, so I see a lot of freaky stuff working days at the hospital as well, but I used to work nights. There's a common phenomenon amongst dementia patients called sundowning. A dementia patient can be sweet and innocent all day, but once night falls they do a complete 180 and become agitated and often hostile. Also, more patients die on night shift for some reason. They always seem to want to crash around 3 AM. My great grandfather had sundowners. During the day he was perfectly lucid, remembered who people were, even called my grandmother all the time. When the sun went down he thought he was living in a hotel in Boise in 1939. My greatest fear is that I'm not actually doing this right now. I'm reliving 2020 from a rest home somewhere in 2050. Train inspector here. Walking a train in the middle of the night, pitch black. Come up to a freight car that had 4 hobos sitting in it, just staring at me. Dudes never said a word, just watched me. I eased by them and kept going, but couldn't get past the feeling of them behind me for a good while. Work third shift stocking shelves in a grocery store. Every couple of nights, a sweet little old lady would come in to buy vanilla extract to make sugar cookies for her grandkids and the neighbors. A few weeks go by and I'm outside on a smoke break. I see our sweet grandma in her car, chugging vanilla extract. She was drinking it to get drunk and hide her alcoholism from her family. Years after that, I worked in a bar as a karaoke host. There was a hotel next door to the bar where some of the less fortunate people in town stayed. One of the hotel guests was a regular in the bar. This dude, his GF and I did a shot to celebrate him finding a good job and getting accepted to a trailer park. He goes next door to get a snack and says he'll be right back. 30 minutes later we see flashing lights outside. He got a snack of H, passed out in the parking lot next to his car and had his head run over by another guest pulling into the adjacent parking spot. It bore a similarity to a watermelon at a gala show. Post finale, I'll never unsee that. As I was reading the vanilla comment I thought cheese, yep, drinking it. Then, you mentioned making cookies for grandkids and neighbors, and I felt bad for being jaded and automatically assuming the worst. Then, I realized why I am the way I am. I used to work nights in a hospital setting. At one point, I was taking the city bus to work. There was a lady who got off the bus and left her baby. The bus driver pulled the bus over and tried to find her, but it was nighttime and he couldn't find her. He called the police. Before the police got there, the woman came running back, realizing that she had forgotten something. My boss did not believe me when I told her why I was late. Sleep deprivation is a real crappy thing. Was standing topside watch in the Navy at sea on a dark night when the sky suddenly turned bright. For about 3 seconds something was incoming so bright it lit all the weather decks up like daylight. This caused quite a commotion in the bridge and operations. We were forward deployed during wartime, although not in a region where active fighting was expected. Obviously everyone's worry was that we might be under attack. Then the sky went dark again just as suddenly as it had began. The only one on the ship who had a direct view was me. It's a meteor. Had to repeat that report with details a bunch of times until people calmed down. The thing broke up into 3 pieces and then vaporized in the atmosphere. It was possibly one of the southern torrids. Right time of year, right part of the globe. And that meteor shower is known for producing fireballs. Being hundreds of nautical miles out on a moonless night, it was truly spectacular. That was far and away the most dramatic meteor I've witnessed, both in terms of the show it put on and in terms of the context. Lucky coincidence to be an astronomy buff standing the right watch at the right moment. That is amazing. What a memory. Worked as office cleaner before COVID. 11:07 AM as a one-man team. One stormy but night, I was on the phone while working when my connection started to fade in and out. All of a sudden there is just a deafeningly loud shriek coming out my phone and the power goes out. Even the emergency lights. I remember looking out the window of the 10th and seeing the whole industrial park black. Nights make everything creepy. Man, that reminds me. One time middle of the night, I am outside on a smoke break and I just see this huge flash of light a little bits away, preceded by the entire section of town our plant is in complete and utter darkness. Turns out a construction crew somehow blew a bunch of transformers. I worked nights at a dog kennel. During the night we just walked the dogs around the parking lot so they could go to the bathroom. The parking lot was surrounded by a wooded area on most sides. There was a stray cat colony living in the woods behind the parking lot. Every time I'd walk a dog through the parking lot, the cats would sprint away and hide in the woods. They did not like the dogs at all. They were terrified of them. One night I'm walking a dog and I see the cats, but this time they're sprinting out of the woods toward me. All the cats just kind of gather in the middle of the parking lot, completely ignoring the barking dog I had. It definitely freaked me out. What was out in the woods that scared the cats out so much that they came running towards me and a dog they were usually terrified of? It was probably just a few coyotes or something, but it felt really creepy wondering what was scaring the cats so badly just out of view in the woods. I worked at an all-night diner while I was in college. One night at about 2 in the morning, a 4-year-old boy wandered in and said he was there to get some food for him and his little sister because they were hungry. When the manager asked where his parents were, he said they were sleeping at home, and that they slept a lot and yelled at him and his sister to be quiet a lot. Turns out he lived at an apartment complex adjacent to the diner, and the parents were addicts. It was heartbreaking. I worked the midnight shift at a crappy little gas station and saw a lot of weird stuff. The guy who claimed he was going to hit it big on the lottery, he would come in with an old baseball card album filled with his past lottery tickets, like 10 years worth of old tickets. Each week he had a new scheme, using crystals to divine the numbers, using previous winning number combinations and dividing by specific numbers, etc. The lady who would always pay in pennies for the pack of Camel White non-filter, soft pack only. The M addict who passed out in his car after buying a 44-ounce big gulp and a bunch of those energy pills. The same person who once a month would steal a 12-pack but because he was part of the manager's family, blind eyes were turned. The lady who would always pay in pennies for the pack of Camel White non-filter, soft pack only. I used to work at a convenience store, and I'll fondly remember the time that a tiny lady, who couldn't speak a word of English, came in and bought a can of beer with 106 pennies. She just emptied a bag full of them on the counter, so I had to sit there and count them all out. Not specific to working night shift, but dead people. I work in a nursing home and unfortunately people dying is the name of the game. Sometimes you see people declining so you know they're on their way out, and you do 15-minute checks on them and catch it fairly quickly. Other times people seem fine and they just go and you don't find them for an hour or so between doing rounds. I was working overnight at a hotel and a guy came in with a H. Super confidently pours out a little pile of coke on the counter and tells me it's his payment for a room. He was more surprised than anyone should have been when it didn't work. LOL, must have been wasted. Not freaky, but I was sitting on a loading dock at 3 AM, very dark, smoking a cig. Saw a cat and I tried to get it to come over. It did. It wasn't a cat, it was a raccoon. Still fed it a cracker. I'm jealous. Used to work overnight at Walmart. I was tasked to stock automotive that night. Furthest corner of the store away from my other co-workers. One of the few times I wasn't listening to music with earbuds and so I would have heard if someone was near me messing with crap. The doll aisle is only a few feet away from where I'm stocking. I walked past the aisle coming from the warehouse and a doll on the opposite end of the aisle started crying. Scared the black off me. I grew up on a farm. One night I was supposed to check the irrigation pumps at 2 AM. It's a 2-mile drive and I am mostly asleep. I park the truck with the lights aimed at the river. When I get out, the headlights are projecting my shadow on rapid layers of fog coming from the river. Above that, the fog was dissipating into the wildest northern lights display I've ever seen. It was like a sheet being violently shook from one horizon to the other. The farm has no sound or noise pollution, there was nothing else to obscure it. The northern lights have a sound. It's like sand on rough paper. So I took several moments to just take in my silhouette was joined visually to green mist across the sky that filled my vision and my ears. A gorilla. I work at Walt Disney World in Florida, and more specifically I work at Animal Kingdom, which is half theme park, half zoo. Now, due to Disney's conservation efforts, they give the animals quite a bit of freedom. They are enclosed, but the enclosures are very large, and their sleep areas are well outside of guest view. It's actually a pretty great setup for the animals. We also don't confine them to their sleep areas at night. So I was working the graveyard shift, 10:30 p.m. to 8 a.m. And as I turn the corner to cross a bridge into the next area, I see a massive figure on the other side of the bridge. One of the gorillas had gotten out of their enclosure and was just walking around the park. I nearly shat myself, as, if you know anything about gorillas, they can be pretty violent. I called it into my boss and they told me that this happens sometimes and to just stay away from it and they will get the caretakers to come do their thing. Honestly, it was the craziest thing I've seen in my time there. Probably just gave them a bunch of fast passes and a banana. One night during a floor set at Versus, we were throwing away trash and going in and out of the stock room, cleaning the floor, removing merchandise, counting registers, opening boxes, etc. We had music blaring and were singing, goofing off while working, and all of a sudden some lady walks out to the register and wants to purchase her items. Probably about 45 minutes after we closed and did the nightly routines of clearing out the fitting rooms, recovering the store, vacuuming. None of us knew she was there. None of us saw her. She wasn't in the store. She wasn't in the back. Not in the bathroom. Not under tables. We think she may have been hiding in the ceiling in the dressing room waiting for us to leave so she could rob the store, but since she realized we weren't leaving she thought it best to come out. It was the absolute scariest moment. I think there were 12 of us in the store that night, all over the place, and none of us saw her. What if she had a gun or a knife or something? She totally could have gone through our personal items and taking things, but she paid for random things and left. She acted like nothing out of the norm was going on. We think she may have been hiding in the ceiling in the dressing room. No. I worked at the ArcLight, bougie movie theater, and I'm a night person, so I usually got the last shifts, which meant I had to clear out every theater and then make sure all the trash bags hidden in the back hallway were clear and clean for the morning crew. The only freaky experience I had was hearing someone running throughout the hall, laughing and just being freaking weird. I thought it was a patron who was drunk, but it lasted for a good half hour, even though I had already called security to come escort them out. The security guards also heard the constant running footsteps and we only ever caught glimpses of the back of the person. Scared the crap out of us. Next day, I pull another night shift and see one of the guards who was on duty. He said they never found the guy and eventually the footsteps and laughing stopped. Still don't know what to make of it, but that was the only time anything like that ever happened. I was a projectionist at one movie theater and a manager at another, and they were both the most haunted buildings I've ever worked in, but we only ever had one instance where people saw a distinct figure. That's pretty wild, whether it was a living person or not. I used to run a small bakery that was kind of hidden and quiet in MD. I would get there at 4 AM alone and it was pretty creepy. The actual bakery where I baked the goods was across a small alley from the store, so I was always running back and forth setting up the shop. One day I walked outside with a basket of cookies and there was an elderly woman walking towards me holding a newspaper and she said, "Here's your paper." I took it and said thank you and realized she had no shoes on. This was winter time. She turned and started walking away. I quickly opened the door and put the paper and cookies inside and went to see if she was okay, and she was totally gone. I looked for her but she was gone. I literally had my eyes off of her for 30 seconds. This bakery pretty much only got business from regular customers and I knew everyone by name that came in and I asked everyone about her and described her, but nobody knew who she was. I contacted the police that morning in case she was missing or had dementia, but nothing ever came of it. In the years of working there I've never seen a soul there early in the morning, and we did not have a newspaper delivery subscription. That's really sad. Hope she ended up okay. I drove taxi for a few years out of college, and not being a morning person I chose the night shifts. Being the city that never sleeps, driving night shift was good money. One night after dropping off a customer at a nightclub, two very drunk girls and a guy got in and asked to take them to one of the boroughs. It was after midnight, so there's plenty wasted people looking for a ride home. The drive was about 35-40 minutes long. I remember overhearing them talking and laughing in the backseat while we were going across town, but I didn't pay much attention. It was only after I came out of the tunnel I realized it had gotten very quiet in the back. I checked my rearview mirror but couldn't see anyone. Thought they must have been really tired to pass out so quickly. I couldn't see down to the back seats due to the divider in yellow cabs. Rest of the ride was silent. Once I got to the destination, I turned on the lights inside the car and announced we're here. When I looked back I only saw the guy. He got up after I called him out a second time. The first thing I asked him was where did the girls go, and he replied, what girls? I said the girls who got in with you. He said he was alone. This is one of the incidents that stuck with me, as I could have sworn I saw them get in and heard the giggling of those girls in the back. This one really creeped me out and made me feel sad. Drunk ghosts reliving their final cab ride over and over. Bleg. I worked as an engineer in Denver. Unfortunately, being security detail came with the job, considering the hours 2 p.m. to 11 p.m. I was doing rounds and we had noticed the previous day that a lock to our electrical room had been removed. It was midwinter last year and we figured someone was trying to stay warm. As much as I want people less fortunate to get ahead any way they can, it was my job to make sure there wasn't someone occupying some spot on the property. So I go to check on the room. I walk up and notice the door is cracked ever so slightly. Pop my flashlight out and beam it in there. Now the room did exactly what it was made for without any budge room. There was maybe slightly less than a foot of space between the wall and the machines that were in there. Thinking it would be impossible for someone to be crammed in there, I do a lazy scan and go to shut the door. As I'm walking down the staircase I hear a shuffling in there. It's late. There's nothing going on and I was newish to the city, so seeing owls or big butt rats was somewhat a thrill. Easily entertained, I guess. So I go back up, pop out the flashlight again, but this time I crouch down to see the space beneath the machines. Sure enough, I see some legs. I call out to whoever it was and tell them they need to vacate. They stay still for a long moment until they started to wriggle themselves out from the tight space. I stayed there cause procedure would be to escort off the block entirely. A woman pops out, looking rough as heck, and starts muttering absolute nonsense. She's taking her time and it is peace snow, so I start to get a little aggravated and tell her to hurry up. This woman turns to me, sticks her tongue out at me with her mouth gaping, broadens her stance and starts to dig in her crotch. She pulls out a warm, totally unused tampon and throws it at me, hitting me in the jaw neck area. Then proceeded to clamber away, yelling something about murdering a molester. What the frick? I stocked shelves at Toys R Us overnight for 5 years. One night, the entirety of 3 walls of board games, 5 shelves tall, 3 feet deep, fell to the floor. Everything, except for a single Ouija board. We left early that night. Years ago I worked for myself doing floor cleaning and waxing. A friend of mine asked me if I would do the floor of the meeting hall at his church. The church was from the late 1700s and was surrounded by an old cemetery. I would get there around 4 a.m. and finish by 6 or 7. My friend would usually come by around 6:30 with an egg sandwich and we'd have breakfast together as I finished. One night it was raining really hard and thundering and lightning. I was working and listening to music with my headphones like I normally did. As one song ended I could hear a lot of banging, like someone was moving furniture in the adjoining offices. Office cleaners had come in the same time as me once or twice, so I thought it was them. The noise went on for a while. When my friend came by with breakfast I told him about the noises. He said the cleaners were let go months before and a church member did the cleaning during the day. We walked back and looked at the offices and everything was as expected. Then my friend told me that there were rumors the church was haunted, but he had never experienced anything. That was my last time working there. I was leaving work at 11:30 the other night and I hit a fatus with the door when I was leaving. Scared the crap out of both of us. Mayo thought this was an interesting way to say that on your way out the door hit you in your fat butt. Night shift nurse here. It isn't freaky anymore because you get used to a lot of things with this job, but when you have a patient with dementia that sundowns, fairly alert and oriented during the day, much more confused at evening night, and you walk by their room at 3 a.m. and hear this normally sweet old lady just cackling at the darkness. I work in a geriatric nursing home as night shift, and I often have this. One time I checked a room. The old lady was not in her bed. Then I looked at the window and got a heart attack. She was just standing and looked out of the window. At night in total darkness. A coworker who ate a bunch of bananas every single night. Not one, a whole bunch from the supermarket. Not really freaky, but definitely baffling. Would also regularly offer me banana despite me saying every time I'm allergic to them, so no thanks. Just bizarre. He also had a drawer in his desk just stuffed full of staplers. Which I know doesn't sound that weird in an office, but it was at least 20 staplers, none of which had staples in them, and I never saw him use one even once. Our printers had an automatic staple function, so they weren't needed at all. I used to work night shift maintenance at a recycling plant. You'll be amazed at all the sex toys and pee people throw away. A bunch of dirty dildos flopping down conveyor belts and Polaroids of amateurs. I worked at a hotel with a huge banquet room for parties of 300-400 people. It was a weeknight and typically the hotel has low guest count and no people in those rooms, so we turned the lights off. I was walking through that room to cut through and saw the outline of a person leaning against the wall at the other end of the room. I thought it was another worker named Simone, since he typically hung around that area since it connects to the pool to the hotel. I gave a head nod and said, "What's up?" No response. Weird. Went about my way and left the room. Came back 10 minutes later and saw the same shadow outline standing there against the wall, and I said, "What's up?" and still no reply. So I began to walk over and it became clear it wasn't Simone. I turned and left the room, finding it weird that someone was just standing in the banquet room with barely any lights on and not responding. The next day I asked Simone if he was in the room yesterday, and he said he wasn't working yesterday and neither was the other pool attendant. Yikes, how creepy. Years ago I was a night shift CNA for an assisted living facility. I had a resident that had a wild week. She didn't have dementia or Alzheimer's either, so it added more weirdness to this situation. It was about midnight when I was doing my rounds when she bursted out of her room holding her giant cross and looked white as a ghost. I asked her, "What's happening? Did you have a bad dream?" She replied after she caught her breath there was someone in her room telling her to get out. Now we have wanderers in our facility and I looked around in her room thinking one may have spooked her. I found nothing. She followed me around that night and didn't go off to bed until 4 AM. I thought that was the last of it. I was wrong. The next night it happens again. She once again claims a man is in her room telling her to leave. Once again I check her room and find nothing. This is where things got really weird. One night when I was in the back helping a resident, my buzzer went off that the front door was opened. I quickly finished up what I was doing and bolted to the front door. Those doors are locked at night. When I found the corner to the front office, I see her standing outside with the door wide open. She was looking at the sky in awe. I asked her what she was doing as it was 2 AM at this point, and she looked at me, put her hand on my shoulder and said, "Death is coming for X." I had to let him in. I coaxed her in the building with a cup of decaf coffee and some biscuits. She told me about the man in her room again and how he's making it difficult for her to sleep. Curiosity got the best of me and I asked if she can tell me what he looks like. I really don't believe in the paranormal. I feel like everything can be explained, but I can't explain how she accurately described a resident who lived in her room years ago. He was an angry man who didn't want to be in the facility in the first place and passed away after refusing his medication. He didn't like anyone in his room except a few CNAs. She even got his name right. Her family started getting concerned for her well-being and asked to have her transfer rooms. After she was moved down the hall, her nightmares stopped. I asked the other PCWs and CNAs if any of them mentioned anything about the previous resident in her old room. All have stated they didn't. Imagine being angry you have to live in an assisted living facility and then being trapped there for eternity. I worked as security at medieval times. Walking around by yourself at night in a semi-spooky castle, especially in the torture devices room, can be pretty scary. Who goes there? I worked a night shift a few years ago in a train station. About 2 AM I noticed a street lamp down the street go out. A second later the whole room went pitch black. I mean so dark, the first thing I did was tap my chest to make sure I was alive. The magnetic release on the office door was dead, so I was able to just walk out. I could hear banging and turned the corner to see the automatic doors opening and closing repeatedly. The large LED screen behind the barriers, which showed the train's times, was flickering up and down, like the old Nokia game Snake. just going boogaloo. I went up to the control office and the nighttime controller said he didn't know what had happened but the phone lines were down too. I walked around the station and it was just eerie. The doors were opening and closing for a few minutes and then stopped. It turned out to be a massive power surge at the substation, which is right next to the station. When I went home at 6 AM the electric company and telephone company were still there trying to fix things. I'll never forget it. Automated systems can be so creepy. I once came out of the bathroom in my office building during a power failure and all the fire doors were shut. I didn't realize how many fire doors that place had. Most of them were open 180 degrees against the shadowy walls typically. If you are new to the channel, you can subscribe. I publish new videos every day. Until then, check another video. Bye for now.